emergency. Some inmate hits the deck, has a heart attack, anything goes wrong, we have that instant augmentation workforce. We can't put a dollar figure on that. It's huge. The other thing that we can't put a dollar figure on is what are those work crews value in our community? We know that they did hundreds, over the course of that last contract, hundreds of thousands of man hours between the Biz Johnson Trail, the post offices, the senior centers, the cemeteries, the parks, the schools, you name it. They did a ton of work. There's a huge community value involved in that if we can get this spun up and get those work crews moving along. So purely, I agree, Jim, purely from a business model, 232, I agree with you. I don't think it gets it done because we've lived it and we know how fast that 232 can evaporate. Now, what is that, what is that soft target, so to speak, knowing that blended staff pattern is invaluable, knowing how much value our community gets out of those work crews. And then last but not least, if we have nurses in there 10 hours a day, there is a tremendous value that comes back to the county jail for helping us with a lot of the things there that where we don't have that kind of medical staffing right now to help us in all the places we could use it. So there are definitely some side and collateral benefits that come in that help that 232 tester.
Now, the other question, and I think there needs to be something in whatever contract language you're working on. By bringing these folks directly into the institutions just like we had before, given the federal court's control of especially the medical care, we already have exposure there because of the AB 109, but this opens it even greater. So what kind of exposure are we going to be incurring by having, the state basically inmates in our facilities and in terms of meeting whatever those court standards are? And we're seeing how it put a lot of pressure on the state and their budget. What kind of potential pressure are we going to be having? Is it going to be able to offset, that trade-off that you were just describing? I mean, I think that has to be balanced in there too. And that's a big concern because the courts have not backed off at all. And, if you have serious health care issues, go out and commit a crime so you can be in the jail system because you can get taken care of. But if you have to fend for yourself in the private sector, you're kind of up a creek without a paddle.
Yeah, some of that exposure already exists because we do parole violators. Someone who violates state parole, they are a CDC commitment to county jail until they, actually long-term now, up to 180 days in jail. So we already have technically CDC inmates in there, but I agree with you. We're cognizant of that. And the other thing that comes along with this is just the complexities of dealing with CDC on an ongoing basis. You get the contract up and running, and John and I know firsthand running that facility. It's a lot of work, a lot of man hours that draw us away from other
CDC changes. In 5 years from now, you're dealing with new people who weren't part of any of the discussions you have today, and so whatever agreements and understandings you have in place all of a sudden change because they're new, they're in charge, and they're going to do it their way. And tough luck. I can't care what that guy said to you 5 years ago. We experienced that in recent years. In the old days, that was never an issue, but it's been a problem in recent years.
Well, and the other couple of caveats. One, this presumes we're going to be able to hire public health nurses. By every scouting report we can generate locally, that's going to be a challenge, to say the least. So in reality, we're probably talking about whether it's a partnership with some of our local healthcare providers, whether it's Northeastern or any of the other groups here in town that might be willing to do it, or some of the big privates that specialize in correctional medicine, from the CFMGs to the PHSs. There's a host of them out there that do healthcare for jails. So in reality, this may cause us to reach beyond our local, the local community to find the resources we need to put the nursing coverage. If that happens, of course, there's a potential that makes a huge change to what these numbers look like because we can't even guess there yet. That's one wrinkle. One other wrinkle just for us trying to hire. We've got a better hiring machine rolling right now than we've ever had in our careers. I mean, we're using an online testing format that's going nonstop. We have a dedicated background investigator that's doing those, strictly those the backgrounds, the psychs, the medicals, everything that goes with it. Since we started the online testing process in July, we've tested 71 people. We have, if everything works out okay at the psychologist this week, we will hire our 7th. So we're not quite 1 in 10. So to spin up the 18 COs it's going to take to put this on, if those numbers hold, then we would have to factor that out, that we're going to have to see 180 applicants somehow. We've only seen 71 in the last 6-7 months. So we're gonna work with, with the Alliance for Workforce and some of those others. There may be an untapped pool of applicants that we just haven't reached yet, but that's another difficulty here to try and do a mass hiring, because if we stick around in that 1 for 10 category, it's gonna be really hard to rustle up this many candidates in a short time frame.
So I appreciate John's work on this and support from county admin. Julie got him the templates to work from, and they put a lot of work into it over the last couple of weeks. But yeah, I think the next steps for us, we've got to look into the medical. We're working with Mel, and we're going to start talking with some private providers to see if those might be a viable option. We've got to explore that, like John said, the contract language, where they're not going to give us an inmate. If we come to terms, they won't give us an inmate until we have those nurses. So we've got to find a mechanism to make that happen. And we've got to figure out what would be a reasonable profit, I guess. What do we think a fair rate would be? Now, what they did in the past, I explained this at a prior meeting. We got additional money over time from them, but it's because we kept putting more inmates into that space. The 128 beds is basically, that section of the facility isn't included in our county jail count that's evaluated by the Board of State and Community Corrections. All right, the Board of State and Community Corrections oversees local detention facilities, including jails and juvenile halls, and they set your rated capacity. Well, they haven't done that down there, so technically we could probably house more than 128 people, but 128 is what we believe the rated capacity would be for the county jail. We don't want to immediately overcrowd that facility, and then, like Mr. Chapman said, subject ourselves to increased level of liability and so on. So, plus for management perspective, from the management side of it, it was really hard to manage that when we had 160 something inmates in there. It was very difficult.
When it closed, we had 164 beds back down there, and it was probably designed for 128. It was cozy.
And that's what, I wanted to make sure you guys understood that. That's part of the reason, before we had a lot lower rate than the $60, but we want to make sure we can operate a safe, efficient facility, and I think it's key that we keep it at what the rated capacity would be, so.
Most all these positions are positions with badges.
18 correctional officers, and actually, I'm glad you brought that up. If you look at that highlighted detail
I
sheet.
just want to make sure, because I'm sure we'll have a
No.
question. I want to make sure
No.
that
And
you understand.
And actually, Jim, if you look, and of course, I know that ends up very small, because we didn't want to print that on a legal sheet, so sorry.
If we could maybe use a little larger font.
We can, but we're trying to keep from putting it on a poster. But if you look, Jim, on the position title side, you will see, and obviously we can generate this larger, but you'll see the actual positions. And there are correctional officers, correctional supervisors, and if you scroll across to the right where Julie has, this is the template that she gave me, and one of the easiest ways to identify, if you see the Social Security column, if somebody's getting Social Security, they are not safety. That is not a safety position, that is not a peace officer position. So that applies to the clerks, it applies to the cooks, it applies to laundry, education, nursing, food service manager, any place you see a dollar amount in for Soc, because any of the peace officer positions that get safety retirement are exempt from Social Security. So that's just at a glance. You could scroll down through there and tell pretty quickly how many of those, Jim, are badges and how many of those are
And I
not.
think that is an excellent way to do it, and that's a good visual site there. And if I do see Mr. Wood on a regular basis, and we've had a number of conversations, and I think he has, legitimate concerns to address, and it'd be nice to, instead of having it be going sideways later, is that we, are on square with it.
And on your budget sheet, gentlemen, that's where you'll see how we came up with the jail offsets. Okay, so you can see on the top half, we estimate about $340,000 worth of personnel offsets. Scroll down to the bottom. Those figures came from making a comparison to what we pay currently out of the county jail only versus what did we pay combined the last full year we had a CCF and a county jail. The heat bill didn't drop by half, and the power bill didn't drop by half. So that's how we calculated those. And then, once again, if you flip back to that personnel data sheet, the ones that are shaded are the ones where we can now share the cost between the county and the state. So the jail captain, we would intend to split him 50-50.
I kind of assumed that might be what you were doing.
Yes, and we would split off 50% of the correctional supervisors, split off the food service manager, split off the maintenance guy, but anyone that's highlighted are ones that we would propose that we split.
Hey, Tom, for what it's worth, I can't see this
Well, I was gonna go get my
So,
binoculars.
I don't have a problem reading this here, I can take my glasses off and read it clearly, but, it's far away, I can't see. Pretty small print.
I can get you a bigger one.
I had a magnifying glass out there looking.
So John, are you going to, obviously, it needs, like you said, we can't raise the rate, so we need to, if that 100% thing, that's kind of a deal breaker there.
Yeah, and I mean, my knee jerk would lean towards that, try and get that to a zero balance in a vacuum. I don't know that we get there, because clearly, for the sake of full disclosure, we're not gonna hide that from CDC. They're gonna know when we submit these budgets, that the budget is X, but we're also offsetting some jail costs. They may say, that's a deal breaker for you guys, but we're not gonna fully fund you so you can offset,
But I don't-
20% of your jail costs.
But I don't
They may not.
see in this budget, and that's something that they need to kind of also deal with, is we've got, maintenance issues and others for the facility, so in terms of having a reserve for that, so what monies we glean in terms of excess isn't like we're gonna go out and have a party tomorrow, it's gonna be money that we're gonna need to set aside and protect, because you're gonna have to replace things as time goes on in the facility, and then on top of that, if you have to shut down the facility, those post-employment expenses you have, for unemployment, other things of that nature, so when you look at your budget spreadsheet, I think you really need to build in what some of those costs are so that you can have that set aside to protect, because when we shut down after the contract expired before, we went for like another year and a half after the facility was closed, still bearing expenses from the previous operation.
Right, and it was fairly easy to identify startup costs, we talked about that before. We would also have to build in some shutdown costs, and planning for a couple of years of
So when I
unemployment.
see the 427,000, I would say maybe 150,000 of that on a year-to-year basis needs to be set aside to kind of build up a reserve to cover whatever sort of shutdown costs you might eventually have to incur and/or for unexpected maintenance things because of the wear and tear of having these folks in that facility. Why should the general fund, at the expense of other things, pay 100% for the replacement of the control system when, the control system that was used by these two facilities over the last 20-plus years, if we would have been setting aside a portion of those kind of contracts would have been there to help cover, not 100%, but you can offset 25 or 50% of what that replacement cost is going to be, having it funded through this in advance, we'd be in a much better shape.
Well, keep in mind though, the good news is that that was the equipment replacement or equipment depreciation fund. About 31 grand a year went into that. So the good news is we didn't have to come back to the general fund, put a new roof on that building this year.
Exactly, 'cause
We were
used
able
that
to
money
use
for
the
it.
equipment depreciation for that
And
exact
and
same
that's kind of,
purpose.
that same principle needs
Yes.
to be built in, and I don't see that depreciation.
We haven't built a depreciation, we did build in a maintenance budget of about 25 grand, which is about what it was, which is okay for keeping up with filters and general maintenance, but it doesn't
Well,
address
if
the
nothing
big
else,
time
the
equipment
grinders
failures.
in the sewer system that you were always having to deal with. That
And the
was-
boiler that we're dealing with today, so you're right.
I would say, so when you deal with them, for them to sit there and go, "Ka-ching, you guys are picking up this chunk of money," in reality, if we have that built into, so that it does show that we're building in those reserves and we're not consuming, we're not walking away with a fat profit.
Yes.
Very good. I think that's good. So what's the, kind of the course of action?
I think what we should do, we'll start looking at the medical options, but I think we do need to tell them we're going to need, well, what we will do is we'll work on building in, some equipment replacement, some contingency money, getting that.
Unemployment trust.
Unemployment trust, getting it where we think it's close, we'll talk with Richard about it, then we're gonna have to get back with them and say, hey, this isn't gonna be sufficient,
Right.
$60, especially at any time, even at 90%. So if they wanna make it 90%, then the dollar amount per bed is gonna have to go up, we'll get together and strategize it, work with Richard a little bit, or at least run what our proposal is by him, and then get back to CDCR and see what they have to say.
Thank you.
Nothing to lose, right?
Yeah. We appreciate your efforts and thanks for bringing up those points. Is there any other comments from the board? You get throwing jokes over there?
Yeah.
How much is a Holiday Inn Express?
Do you have anything more?
Less.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, appreciate it. Okay, we'll take up item H1, contract, county executive officer. He was gonna lead the charge.
Well, you wanna do that? I will.
I don't want to misquote it or,
Get a frog in your throat.
yeah, I'm just afraid talking is not helping.
I'm gonna leave you guys.
Yes, I'm sorry. Please note that
I could hear you thinking, did I?
Supervisor Crowell is leaving.
Why?
Are you sick? Oh, you sick?
No. I just don't wanna get sick.
Oh, thanks. Oh,
After reviewing the contract, there are a couple of proposed deletions to the language. I'll go over that.
Okay.
If you go to number 4, item number 4, the last sentence in that is proposed to be deleted, and it states, if the Board of Supervisors elects to terminate employee due to incapacity, employee shall receive post-termination benefits provided in section 12 below. That sentence is proposed to be deleted. Oh, and adding to the now last sentence that employee will,
may terminate employee without post-termination benefits.
Okay.
in section 8C, I have to give Ms. Spencer credit for pointing this out. In
What section?
In
8C.
8C, in the second sentence, it currently states the county will pay county's share and employee's share for participation in PERS, and the "and" employee share should be deleted.
Right.
That wasn't the intention, that was just.
That's the old language
Right.
moving forward, because the law changed, you can't do that anymore.
Right. Oh, in the, what section, we're on 8B. The intention was that the bank of vacation and sick credit would not be paid out in the event of termination, and so
Only in excess of 160 hours.
you only,
160.
In excess.
so the bank would not be paid out upon termination, and so,
The language was basically only pay out in excess of 160 hours.
Like employees should be paid for any unused accrued vacation in excess of the initial 160 hours upon either voluntary or involuntary.
yes.
Right.
Right.
That's it.
Okay. Were those all up?
Those are all,
Is there any, any questions? Any other questions on the board?
I have no questions.
We'll go to the public. Is there anybody that would like to speak on this matter? Lucky you. What'd you do? Cut everybody off?
Thanks, Georgie.
Okay. If I'd have known this would be this easy, I'd have brought this up first thing this morning.
It wouldn't went like this. 9:30.
Okay, so, okay, we're back to the board. Any further discussion before we move forward? Okay. The action requested is to approve and authorize the chairman to sign the contract. We have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
With the amended changes?
Yes, with.
With the provisions and the changes to
Mr.
contract,
Chairman,
sorry.
we've had a lot of discussion with Mr. Egan. This thing has been in the works for quite a while, and I think it's come to a satisfactory conclusion, and I will second the motion, Mr. Hammond.
Okay, it's been moved and second, under discussion. Yeah, I just wanna publicly thank again you, Richard, for all the times you've stepped up and helped out. I mean, you didn't need to do that, but you did it, and, that's very admirable of you. I sincerely mean that, you know.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
A lot of extra job, headache, ridicule, and everything else that goes with it. And anyhow, thank you from one citizen. Thank you.
Richard, can you please explain what's gonna happen with the treasurer tax collector position now after the democracy?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So as the contract goes into effect March 10th, and so upon me assuming the office of county executive officer, I will automatically vacate the treasurer tax collector office, and it will fall to the board to appoint the remainder of my term, which would be through, I think, the first Monday in 2015. Currently, the sign-up period, the nomination period is open for that next term, which would begin the first Monday in
I think
2015.
it's January 7th.
Okay. And so an election will occur, of course, with the rest of the
January
elections. 5th, okay, in June and potentially in November, if there's a runoff.
Absent the board making an interim appointment, the assistant automatically becomes the acting treasurer.
I'm not sure of that. And as the board knows now, I'm serving both roles under an emergency resolution that was adopted, and theoretically, perhaps council and I should investigate that. That situation may be able to continue for a short period of time, but no more than 6 months from when I took.
Can
Start.
we, since the contract is due to go into effect, Mr. Chairman, on Monday, March 10th, and our next meeting after today's meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, March 11th, that we have an item on the agenda for Tuesday, March 11th, that would, not just to discuss, but to give us the opportunity to take an action and decide at that time what to do with an appointment or however.
Okay. So, okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. If there's no,
You know, I just want to say, Mr. Chairman, I want to echo your comments in terms of Mr. Egan. He's been an employee for the county for 20 years. He's stood before the voters for 4 different times for his current office that he's held, and has had the confidence of the voters during that time period. He really has prepared himself for this particular moment. We've had an opportunity to watch him develop through that time period, and I'm excited that we have somebody available to us of the caliber of Mr. Egan to hopefully provide the leadership with staff and working with the board to move us along to greater and better things.
thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Enough good stuff.
That's enough of that.
None of that stuff?
Then he'll be able to take the next 20 years, he'll be taking all kinds of lashings.
Yeah, all right. Okay, I'd like to poll the vote. So Madam Clerk, can you poll the vote, please?
Supervisor Chapman?
Aye.
Supervisor Alba?
Aye.
Supervisor Pyle? Oh, he's not here, sorry. Supervisor Hammond?
Aye.
And Supervisor Chairman Watson?
Aye. Yeah, thank you. Congratulations, Richard.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
I don't know what we're congratulating you for, but
Okay.
I was just gonna say a few words. Thank all of you for having the confidence in me to appoint me to this position. I really look forward to working with each of you, the public, and the great employees that we have at the county in moving forward and making our community an even better place than it already is. And that's all I have to say.
Thanks. Okay, I think that Did I miss anything?
I had two items under my information for the board, very quickly. I had a department head meeting last week where since Julie was out of town in Hawaii, I announced to the group that I wanted to complete the budget process for next year by the end of this fiscal year, which would be June 30th. To that end, I would like to reconvene the budget committee consisting of the auditor, chairman, vice chairman, and a few others this next month in March and begin that process. I just wanted to inform the board of that. The other thing, I wanted to correct something I said earlier today about the Economic Development 112 fund. The negative balance that I gave you of $449,000 was as of the end of the 2012-13 year, June 30th. That balance has now not grown, shrank to a negative $560,000. So that's the
So it went from what?
went from a negative $449,000 to a negative $560,000
So, and over how much time?
in the last 8 months.
I don't know that that's including what's going to be received through the remainder of this year, though.
Right, just to.
So that's not,
Okay,
that's an unaudited figure.
okay. So we could have the full, there might be more of the story, but we'll have that next time.
I
Okay.
just wanted to clarify that the number I gave you was out of the.
If nothing happens between now and June 30th, there's 560,000 in the hole instead of 449,000.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's not very good news.
That's my first report. You're fired.
You waited until after the contract.
Like it bear as bad news. If there is nothing more, we'll stand adjourned.
Closed session.
Closed session.
Unfortunately.
We do have solid waste for the 3 o'clock, so we have.
We better hurry.
That'll conclude our regular
Solid
business.
waste.